What's going on, guys? Crypto Renegade here, back in action for you with another first look hardware wallet review. So kicking this off, I know it's been a while since I've made some videos. I've been working on some other projects, but I definitely have gotten the itch, and I am going to be having more consistent content come out probably once a week, but we'll see how much time I have and how I'm able to do this. So there's going to be a couple disclaimers I'm going to give here before I get into this. Number one, I don't physically have this wallet. The company reached out to me and wanted to send me one, and I haven't gotten back to them yet. Secondly is I just want to go over a few disclaimers that one, this isn't sponsored, there's no affiliate links, I don't have a dog in this fight. And the second disclaimer is if you've seen my videos for any amount of time, you already know how I feel about smart card NFC based crypto wallets, similar to Arculus, similar to Hash Wallet. And I'm going to kind of go into some of those details of what I look for being in the crypto security game for a long time, and some of the things that you probably should be aware of before you look at buying any crypto hardware wallet. And I'll have some follow-up videos that go in depth into that. But I wanted to really give this an objective view. I will point out some pros, some cons, and then just give you some things that you probably haven't thought about so that you can make a better decision for yourself. So without further ado, let's jump right in. All right, guys, welcome back. So let's do this first look at the Tangem cryptocurrency hardware wallet. Again, I don't know if it's Tangem or Tangem. I don't think it really matters. But again, as I mentioned, I don't have this wallet, so I just want to look at purely what they have on the website and what they've made public. And then if I am sent a wallet to do a review later, I'll let you guys know and do another follow-up wallet. But the reason I'm making this video, as much as I've been getting a lot of requests, as most of you probably know if you followed me for a while, a biggest fan of the Engrave wallet for multiple reasons. I'll link a video at the end of this one explaining why in full depth, and I'll probably be doing another follow-up video on that later. However, this particular wallet, I've been getting a lot of commented requests, people asking me all the time, how does this work compared to this? And just so many comments about this particular wallet. So I figured I would take some time, do some research, and jump right in. So let me look at some of the basics here for you and point out some things that I'm concerned about, but also some things that are actually, I try to look at this objectively from a new user that isn't as ingrained in crypto as I am in security, and looking at from user experience, ease of use, but also, again, security being the most important thing. As we've learned with Ledger lately, trust and security are the most important things when it comes to securing your private keys and holding your crypto offline in your possession with self-custody. So they're touting this wallet. We're going to touch on a couple things: the price, the security, what they say, how it works, and all of that. But they say this wallet has over 6,000 coins and tokens. This is because they're using Trust Wallet and Wallet Connect, which are dApps and third-party wallets that support all of those tokens, which again is a good thing. The more token support, the more coin support that you have, staking support, all those things, those are all nice to have features, but they're not the most important feature. Again, to each their own, but looking at this from a security standpoint, from a trust standpoint, are my 6 figures, 7 figures worth of crypto going to be secure on a little credit card that I can keep in my wallet? Is that something I want to trust? That's up for you to decide, but for me, the answer is no. And I'm going to point out some inherent flaws if you haven't seen my other videos on what the real risk is with credit card-based wallets. I'll also point out some pros if you really want to know that, to try to be as objective as possible, but I'm going to kind of explain this. They're marketing it as, look, it's just like a bank card. Now, we're going to come back to that keyword later, bank card, so remember that. But it says it looks like a bank card. Again, this is very similar to the current version of Hash Wallet, the current version of Arculus. They're all touting the NFC, which is near field communication. It's what you use for Apple Pay. When you use your debit card or credit card at the gas pump, just the tap to pay go. And it's a sort of a wireless communication frequency that helps transmit data. So again, this is not an air-gapped wallet. It's a cordless wallet and it's a wireless wallet, but it is not air-gapped, and that is a critical thing to understand. Air-gapped means there is zero online connection, frequency connection, anything like that whatsoever, which is inherently more safe than any type of wireless or Bluetooth or NFC or any other type of communication standards. So just wanted to point that out. I watched obviously some other videos from some other creators and did some deep dives. I mean, it is a pretty easy setup process. I will say that in terms of like this compared to Arculus, the main key thing here is they do not have a 12 to 24 word BIP39 security seed phrase on this device, and I'll explain that in a minute when we get there. But basically, this is virtually identical to that process where they'll have their own method of backup, which technically makes it different and unique from that, but there's some pros and some cons to that. It does have an EAL6 plus security element chip that is more than the Arculus, that is more than the hash wallet, and technically the security element chip in this technically is more than the Ngrave. The Ngrave has an EAL7 OS certification, so it has the highest security level certification for the entire operating system, but the security element chip is the EAL5 plus, which is pretty much standard. So I will give them a feather in the cap there that they are doing that. Because it's a credit card, it's water resistant, dust resistant, temperature resistant, and of course there is a benefit to no charging, no cables, not having to worry about batteries, and and just less contact points. So again, same features as any other credit card or card-based smart wallet. It says they have a 25 plus year replacement warranty. That's just because, it's like a debit card and a credit card. So they're cheap and they're easy to make, which we'll get to in a minute. It says here we have the smart backup. So it says, we advise digital asset holders against using the seed phrase for backup. Keeping the key to your assets on a sheet of paper is prone to multiple security risks. Tangem has developed a safer alternative. When you activate the Tangem wallet, the chip in the card generates a random private key which never gets exposed. Neither Tangem nor anyone else knows it. It is therefore impossible to steal it or trick you out of your funds. Instead of the seed phrase, additional cards are used for backup. That's why Tangem wallet is sold as a 2 to 3 card set. Now, I'm going to point out something here in a minute. It says, neither Tangem nor anyone else knows your private key. That means you don't know how this security element chip is generating the private key. You have no idea if there's a database somewhere. You have no idea if that's being used by any other government, any other bank. Now, we're going to go into the open source concept of this in just a second, but I want you to think about this real quick. This is used in the same technology as smart cards. That's the same as your debit card, which is issued by a bank. That's the same as your credit card, also issued by a bank. And when you think about ways to transact, that little chip verification in there, that's where all the private data is stored, is on that little chip. Now, if you were to call a bank up and ask, hey, does any other government or any other entity have a backdoor to my chip? The representative you talk to isn't going to be able to know the answer to that, but the obvious answer is yes, they do have a backdoor to that chip. That chip is meant to verify and hold secure hashes of data, but they always have a backdoor, which I will make another follow-up video explaining why a lot of these security element chips do have backdoors or have access based on the manufacturing process that they have in place with government entities that allow them to operate and so on and so forth. I'll go down that rabbit hole in a different video, but just understand that the chip-based cards, just like your debit card, just like your credit card, just like this card, just like the Arculus card, just like the hash wallet card, you have to trust that chip and where it comes from in order to know that your private key generation and your seed phrase are safe. So hold that in the back of your mind. It says here, trust based on facts. It has an open source application, and it says it has an independent firmware audit. Now, I want to give a pro here. An independent firmware audit is good. Ideally, I'd like to see multiple independent firmware audits. Again, going back to Ngrave, the wallet that is my favorite right now, it has multiple audits, multiple people, multiple factors that have really scrutinized it and its process to make sure that it's secure. Now, it says here that it's open source. We do not collect any personal data. Our app has no backdoors. Inspect it yourself on GitHub. App can be, recreated even if Tangem as a company ceases to exist. So I want to make this a key point because this came up in a lot of questions about what happened with Ledger, admitting that they do have a backdoor to your private keys. Ledger open sources only part of their application. So, for example, the iOS or Android app, the interface that you actually use with the card to transact, that's open source, okay? The random number generator is not open source. The hardware security element chip is not open source. The physical hardware part of things, the thing that actually matters, where your private key, where your money is stored, that's not open source. What they have here that is open source, and we're going to touch on this in a second, is just the iOS and Android app. And because there's no private data or no private keys generated on that app, that's a pro, right? You don't want your private keys generated on something that's open source. However, this is just the application. So you can be confident that the application, like you download on your phone, your iOS or your Android app, is going to be secure. And again, I'm going to make a whole different video on the pros and cons of open source, what makes open source more secure, and other elements that don't. So hit a like or comment below if you want me to do a full deep dive security on open source. Leave it down in the comments. It basically just shows the basic functionality here. You can transfer, meaning you can send and receive. You can swap. They use 1inch as one of their dexes for using DeFi, and then Wallet Connect for DApps, NFTs, and so on. They have a basic FAQs, basic questions for people that are new to crypto. What happens if I lose it? What happens if the company goes out of business? These are all basic questions that pretty much everyone has an answer for. So this is actually a very cheap hardware wallet. Now, they give you an option of 2 cards or 3 cards. I want to touch on this on why they have multiple cards. So you have one card that is the main source of your private keys that is generated, and that's where your funds are stored. And instead of having a 12 to 24 word backup, what they're doing is they have either a second card as a backup or 3 cards. And so what that does, just so we're clear, is if you have all your private keys and all your data on one card, they have 2 additional cards as backups where it clones that data. So basically, it takes your private keys from card 1, it transfers it to 2 other cards. So in the event that you lose your main card, those 2 other cards will be able to restore your funds. If you lose those 2 other cards, you're SOL. There's nothing you can do. You don't have a word phrase. There's pros and cons to the seed phrase, and I understand where they're coming from here. Not being able to properly manage a seed phrase is a security risk. However, if you lose your cards, there's no way to get your funds back. There's no way to memorize 12 words. There's no way to have any sort of other backup offline to where you could restore it to another wallet with another company. If you lose all 3 of these cards, you forget where they are, you whatever, it's done, it's gone. Just understand that. Now, with all that said, that's really to each their own how they want to manage their own risk, but 2 cards at $43 and 3 cards at $55 is cheap. And the reason it's cheap is because these are the same type of cards and technology that banks use. You know, when you sign up for a bank account and they send you a debit card in the mail for free, it's free because it costs virtually nothing. So you get what you pay for. Just think about that. Like the physical card itself may have some security inherently built into it, but the reason that the price is so much cheaper than, say, Arculus or Hash Wallet or anything like this is because these cards literally cost pennies to make, and so they have much higher margins and they have the ability to do this. And it's actually a unique way. I'm going to give them credit here. Like having multiple cards as a backup is an interesting idea if someone's responsible and someone really knows what they're doing. It doesn't have a way to split or shard the seed phrase. It doesn't have anything like that. These are simply just duplicates of the same private key across multiple cards. Now, one question you may want to ask yourself is, if my private key never leaves card A, so it's secure, it's on that chip, it never leaves, how exactly are they moving it and cloning it to these 2 other cards? Furthermore, if it is able to be cloned between these 2 cards, who's to say that it can't be cloned by any other competitor, any other smart card manufacturer using NFC? And that doesn't get addressed in the GitHub and in the open source materials. And I don't have the answer to that. I just want you to be thinking about that because I want people who were burned by the Ledger experience, and we all wanted to trust Ledger, and trust takes a lifetime to build and only a second to break. There is some level of trust you're going to have or have to have with any company that you buy a hardware wallet from. That's just the reality of it. But when someone breaks your trust, or they promise you one thing and it turns out to be a lie, or it turns out to be something different, or it turns out to not be the whole truth, you need to be aware of that and kind of consider those factors when making a decision. So the other key thing before I touch on some of the security and some of the GitHub stuff is the reason that I typically do not like smart card wallets, especially ones that are blank. And to be clear, what I mean by blank here is there is no screen. So if I interact with this wallet with an iOS app on my iPhone and I have the card and it says, okay, you're sending from your wallet A to wallet B, and we want to use your card to sign the transaction, right? That makes sense. But how do I know that if I sign my card, it says on the iOS app, wallet A, my address, send to wallet B, the recipient's address. If there's no verification of the recipient address on the card, meaning there's no screen on this card, there's no way for me to verify on the physical hardware wallet itself that the address matches from the phone that I'm looking at and the card, then that's called blind signing. I'm trusting that what's on my screen on my iPhone is correct and that I'm authorizing it or signing it with this card. Now, I want you to think about that for a minute. You're trusting the iOS app, it's open source, it says it's going to do this, but the physical hardware device has no way for you to authenticate that. Now, most other hardware wallets with screens, this would be like Ngrave, this would be like Trezor, this would be any hardware wallet with a screen, you have the ability to authenticate and verify that the address matches on the hardware wallet, same as the app that you use to interface with it. That's extra secure because you know exactly what you're signing as opposed to just tapping the card below. I had the same problem with Arculus. I have to trust the app. I have to trust the card, but there's no screen on the card. There's no way for me to verify this address. There's no way for me to verify this information. You just have to trust. And in today's day and age, we already know that that's a very difficult thing to do because there's been so many times in this industry where people have broken our trust. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I want you to think about that. Again, I'm going to leave a link down below to the hardware wallet that I've scrutinized every which way I can, and it's still not 100% perfect, but it's still the best in my opinion. That being the Ngrave, I'll link it down below if you really want to look for a better alternative. But I'm pointing out a couple of things because I've used pretty much every hardware wallet, the exception of this and maybe one or two others. You need to be focused on the security part of things because at the end of the day, if you have all these dApps and staking and other features, those are all great and those are good to have. But if the security basics, the fundamentals of security when using a hardware wallet aren't met, then all of that is useless. If you don't have peace of mind, then all the other features and bells and whistles and all those things don't matter. The foundation matters. So I just want you to keep that in mind. We're almost done. Thanks for hanging in there with me. I'm trying to add as much value as I can through this. Again, if you're looking for something cheap, something that's easy to use, then yeah, this is a wallet that you could do. I personally wouldn't invest in a wallet that doesn't at least have a screen. I would still choose a Trezor over this. They're also open source. They also have a different security model. In my opinion, I have peace of mind knowing that I can see and sign the transaction and authenticate it on my hardware wallet and being able to visually see that the transaction matches what it is on the web application or mobile application or whatever. That's me personally. Some people don't care. Some people maybe just want to use this as like a day-to-day transactor, sort of like a hot wallet where you never have more on this wallet than you do on like in your physical wallet, like your wallet with your dollar bills and whatnot. And that's fine. As long as you're open to the risk and you know that if you lose that, you're not out of the game, I wouldn't use this for long-term storage if you paid me. So just keep that in mind. There's different use cases, there's different benefits, there's different reasons why one might want to use an NFC card like this. Again, it's accessible. You can take it in the wallet. It's easy to sign. It's just tap and go. I get the user experience is pretty easy with this, but from a security standpoint and a long-term storage standpoint, I personally wouldn't use this for those reasons. Now, I'm going to touch on two other quick things here. First, we're going to take a quick look at the GitHub. I want to point out, like I said earlier in the video, that they open source the application, meaning the iOS and the Android app. And it is all here. I did review it. They're not hiding anything. They have a lot of the different code that they're using for the application. But to be clear, they are not open sourcing the hardware. They're only open sourcing the software. Why does that matter? Because again, all your money's on the hardware. It's not on the software. The software is only used to interface and initiate transaction. Your actual signing device, which is the Tangem card, and the hardware, that's where the money is. Not on the app. The app is just the initiator. Your physical hardware device is how you tap and sign. So I just want you to keep that. Now, if you stop and think about that for a minute, open source is great. I love open source. Audit the web application because that's good. But if there's no way to audit the hardware, then what is the point? It's better than nothing, but it doesn't solve the open source problem of the questions I get. Is it open source? Is it open source? And I'm going to make a whole video on open source and the things you need to look for, the questions you need to ask yourself if you really care about security. If you don't care about security, then video is useless to you. But I like to emphasize the security, especially exactly with what happened with Ledger lately, which again, I'll do in another video. Open source, to recap, open source on the software is here. Open source on the hardware is not. Take that as you will. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about, I was digging through the FAQs in the help center of the Tangem wallet here, and it gives some good information. They're very thorough. I want to give credit where credit's due. They're trying to be as transparent as they possibly can with the hardware security and access points that they're using, for lack of a better term. The one thing that I highlighted here that I want to cover is, in my opinion, the most important. Each individual crypto investor is going to look at this differently, but this is the thing that stuck out to me because this is what I look for, because I have a decent amount of holdings. I want to make sure that it's secure in the best possible way. A lot of that comes down to the private key, not just the private key itself, which is the keys to the kingdom, but how the private key is generated. How is it stored? Do I have a copy of the private key? If I don't, who does? So I'm going to read this real quick and we're going to talk about it and then we can wrap this up. So one of the questions in the help center says, how to know my private key? The card is based on a chip that generates a private key during wallet creation using a hardware random number generator. So far, so good. The entropy for the random number is taken from the chip's physical sensors. The key never leaves the chip in plain sight and after the wallet is activated. The chip's primary purpose is to keep it safe and sound. Okay, so the private key is generated on the chip and it's stored on the chip. Generated, stored, same location. Thus, no one can ever find out your private. The secret, and here's the key part, the secret is safe even from you. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here, but this last part is what sticks out. The secret is safe even from you. Now, I don't know about you, but if I have a hardware wallet which sole purpose is to store my private key. Private key is the only thing that really matters here because that private key allows you to send anything from any wallet. That's your proof of ownership of this amount of crypto. It says the secret safe even from you. I don't know about you. I personally would never use a hardware wallet where I didn't have access to the private key. If I didn't know the private key or have the ability to take my private key and restore it elsewhere, that's an immediate red flag. That's a deal breaker entirely. Now, you may ask why. Well, why do I need to know the private key? If you don't know the private key, then you don't own your crypto. Not your keys, not your coins. That's really what that means. And if they're keeping the secret safe from you, this is supposed to be a cold storage device where it's self-custody, where you control the private key. But they're not telling you what the private key is. Again, I'm going to use another example on Engrave because I like it and they've addressed this. They have a unique key generation process. I'll leave the video again at the end so you can watch that and learn about how that works. But more importantly, you get to know your private key and know that it's unique. That key is everything. If you lose your private key or if you leave it out so someone can copy it, then it's done. Then it's not safe. If you don't personally take responsibility and know your own private key, then you don't own your crypto. And that's the key thing here is they're not telling you your private key. Therefore, you can't make a backup of it. Therefore, you can't transfer it to another wallet if you lose access to the hardware. Therefore, they've kept you in a really closed box where the chip manufacturer, whether it be monitored by a government, again, I'm going to go down a rabbit hole on that later, but I just want you to understand the basics that they're not giving you the private key here. They're keeping it from you. So you don't own or control the crypto unless you know your private key. I have multiple resources, videos, free ebooks on how to keep your private key safe, distributed, broken up, so that you have the ability to restore it yourself. When we're talking about a hardware wallet, they're not telling you the private key. And I can't stress this enough that that's a huge red flag. This is the problem with these NFC screenless smart card wallets that I see, is that it's not safe because they're not telling you where the private key is. Now, that's not saying that they know your private key. It might be true that they don't know your private key. But if you also don't know your private key, then who does? Stop and think about that for a minute. If they don't know and you don't know, then who knows? Chip manufacturer. And who runs the chip manufacturing? You don't know. That's not open source. So I hope that's clear. And I know I'm beating this with a dead horse, but again, I get a lot of comments and a lot of questions of like, well, we trusted Ledger, what happened? Well, it's the same type of thing. There's a certain level of trust that people have. And the truth is most people don't want to learn how to be secure. They want it easy. They want to set it and they want to forget it and then just trust that it's fine. But we've learned that you just can't do that anymore. You can't just trust the company that you're buying a hardware wallet from anymore. You have to have proof. You have to have verifiability. You have to have a way of knowing your own private key. So in case they break your trust, like in the case of Ledger, that you can take your funds and transfer it to a new wallet that you do trust. That simple. So I just wanted to point that out here. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns on anything that I've talked about here today, please let me know in the comments. If you want me to make an in-depth video of the open source, pros, cons, what to look for, what not to look for, what makes it secure, what makes it not, comment down below, let me know. I have a few other interesting videos about crypto security and things that you want to look at. Especially I find that since I took some time off and having some of these things from people that are like, well, I don't trust Ledger, you know, should I trust Trezor? Should I do this? Should I do that? I'm not going to try to endorse necessarily any particular company. I'm just going to give you things to think about as you go through your hunt. And I'm not going to try to hide the fact that one, this isn't sponsored. I'm not getting any affiliates. There's no benefit to me making this video other than you guys requested that I make it. And here's just my blunt, honest truth of what I think about it. For what it is, if you're using it in terms of a hot wallet, it works fine, because if you end up losing the money, then you've already accepted that risk. But long-term storage, massive amounts of funds, no way. It's an interesting concept. It's very user-friendly. There are a lot of pros to this, but it depends on your use case and your circumstance and how much money you're actually dealing with. Would I use this if I only kept $100 on it and I just wanted to go out and spend it and make trades on the go? Sure. Because if I lose that $100, that's no skin off my back. I want you to think about these things. I want you to understand them. I want you to question yourself, question the company, question everything, question everyone, like a crypto anarchist would do. So that way you can feel confident in whatever decision that you make and understanding the differences and the pros and the cons. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up here. Crypto Renegade out.